Hello, everybody. Thanks, Tyg, for saying you can't see or hear anything. Can you see the start screen there at all? Or can you hear me now? There was a bit of a blip at the beginning there, but I'm not sure whether it's working or not. Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Jamie and Jonathan. I appreciate that. Okay, so we'll hopefully everything is okay. It's I'm using Streamlabs. It updated this morning, and it looks like there was a bit of a blip saying that stream had stopped, but yeah, it looks like it's okay, and we have viewers, so I'll press ahead. That's great. Thanks, everybody. That's brilliant. It's great to see you here, and it's good to be back again. So hopefully all will go okay. So we're on to week 9, and this week it's lecture 17. There's only one lecture this week. Okay, I'll just talk to you a little bit about that. And don't need any lessons this week or any additional lessons. We're going to talk this afternoon by giving you a little overview of web development architectures, just to go back and have a look and reflect on what we've been doing by now. So we're going to talk about LAMP and mean. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about JAMstack as well, just so you can place these things in context and just reflect a little on the ways that we can do things when we start to build web apps. I mean, you know, and you've seen two approaches already. Well, mostly two approaches. You know, you've seen how we can put together some front ends, and then we have the middleware, you know, where we have the back end stuff as well. So we have that communication middleware, if you like, say jQuery, where we can talk across to a service, and that service can be some REST API, and it can be implemented using, say, any technology you like, really. And we've been looking at Node.js, and we're going to look. We have looked a little bit at PHP as well. We could be using Python. You know, we could be using Java for this. We could be using lots of other technologies as well. C#, C. Any of these technologies, they'll work in a similar way to the Node.js, of course. And then we have the backend database tier as well. So that sits there as well. So we've got a full stack there, and we're starting now. We're at a point close to the end. We're in the last quarter, of course. Where we're putting all these tiers together to build this full stack, and we can build full applications. And you have choices of technologies. I mean, you may want to have relational database at the back end, and now, you know, we're going to look at MongoDB, which is a collection-based one, of course, as well. So you can swap and change these as you move along, and you have choices. You know, and I wanted to give you choices and show you that what you learn for one language will be applicable to another language as well. And so that, you know, don't be afraid if you come across say a job advertisement that says, I want somebody, you know, to develop some backends using Python. Well, you know, if you know some Python already and you understand how to do the Node.js stuff, then you can start looking at Flask or something with Python and see that it's pretty much the exact same way. You know, same technology, same rules, same designs apply. I mean, if you understand your database and the connection, how you connect your database to your backend service, then you can say, well, yeah, well, I know how to do this with this language, so I should be able to learn how to do it with the other one. You come up to speed very, very quickly. So, you know, the idea is to reflect in a way and be metacognitive, you know, and know what you know, and learn a little bit more about in a general sense about what you're actually achieving. Don't all the time get embedded in the actual language. You know, try to abstract up a little bit if you can. It's the best way to approach this. So this week, let me just get some water. Sorry. Okay, so this week it's just a little bit of a breather before we move into the last section of the course. So I wanted to review a few things for you. So let's have a look at this particular one here. Okay, so we're into the last part of the module here, and you'll notice that I say here that there's no lecture 18 this particular time. Okay, so our lessons really for this topic, just mostly a theoretical overview. The reason is because there should be lectures and no lectures on Good Friday. That's week 8, and I did put up that extra set of lectures for week 8. So I've given you one lecture more than you should have had, you know. And while I don't mind doing it, it's quite happy. I don't want to overwork it either, really. And I did give you all those extra bonus lessons, and I have another one to come, maybe another 2 of these bonus lessons as well. One where I'm going to use Express as the backend API and for Node.js, and show you how you can connect to your database as well using MongoDB, for example. And so I have 2 or 3 more of these short lessons as well, and I'll fill in the slots. And I don't want to give you too many extra things, really. These are just meant to be bonuses, but you can have, all the material will be in the lectures anyway, but I don't want to overwork you with extra material either. It wouldn't be fair. To have material that's, you feel you should be looking at, at least with the bonus lessons. It's material that's covered elsewhere, but I'm just redoing it with a different kind of example. Maybe that's more aligned with this year's lecture. So that's the general plan. So really, you don't have to worry about getting extra lessons this week. A breather. Just look at this lecture, and it's about reflection, so you should be okay. And then we'll move into the last section of the course, which will be a little bit more interesting as well, where we're looking at Express and building mean applications. And we'll talk a little bit about mean today then. So the lecture will mostly focus on reviewing LAMP and mean architectures, and we'll review some of the differences between the PHP and the Node.js, and we'll understand when you should use mean or LAMP. So remember, LAMP, of course, was the Linux, Apache, MySQL, or MongoDB, BB, and PHP, or Perl, or Python, whatever you want, backend, and mean will be MongoDB Express, which we haven't come across yet in any detail, Angular, and Node, okay, JS as well. So we'll see about some details about the popularities of these technologies and the architectures. And you should be asking yourself, well, which ones should I learn? And you're probably getting to the point where you realize now that, I can't do everything at this stage. I can have a sense that I can't learn all the technologies, or if you do, it's going to be hard work. And you end up putting an awful lot of effort in. So my recommendation to students at this point is that it's probably a good idea to choose a technology for an assignment and work with those technologies for that assignment. And then maybe you might decide, well, I'm going to stick with this technology for a little bit later. And then I'm going to, or maybe I'll change the technologies for the next set. So for assignment 4, I said you could use, or you had to use a relational database for the back end, and you didn't use any platforms for the REST API. You manage that manually using Node.js or PHP itself, and then you had a choice of, well, will I use Node or will I use PHP? And you make a choice. And students have come back to me and said, well, I've gone this route, and other students have gone some other route. And so with the next assignment now, again, it's open to flexibility again. So I'm expecting you to use MongoDB this time as the backend storage collection database, and I don't expect you to use a specific technology. You can use PHP if you wish, you can use Node if you wish, and I don't mind what sort of front end you use if you wish. It's completely flexible. In fact, you don't need an actual front end, but you'll see from the assignment that you get extra credit for having a front end, and you can choose any technology you like for that. So that's okay. And the idea is that there are choices. I don't expect you to know how to do everything using all of the languages. It's probably a big ask. I don't know how to do it with all of the languages either. It's just not the way it is. Things change all the time. But I could swap out Python. I swap out PHP and put in Python. I could do whatever I felt like, really. But I'm just giving you 2 so you have choices, really. And that's why we're going to compare 2 in this particular lecture. So you can see that there are similarities. And if you learn something with one, you'll probably be enough to keep you going and be able to do all of the assignments. And I hope that's reassuring for you in some way. Now, at the end of this module, of course, there's an examination. There's a multiple choice exam, and then there's a coding test. And you're completely free and open with the coding test to build whatever language you choose. And I'm not specifying you have to use PHP or Node or relational databases or MongoDB. You're completely free to build a solution using any of the technologies that we use. So you can mix and match those. So for now, I guess the idea is that try to learn one well, okay, but understand the other one, and then understand the similarities and understand the differences, and you'll be fine. Okay, so I also want to talk to you a little bit about something that's fairly new, relatively new, well, since 2017, called JAMstack. And I was quite impressed when I read about this, so I thought I'd introduce it for you as well. It's kind of a welcome diversion from the 2 that we've been looking at already. Okay, so let's have a quick look then to review LAMP and mean. So remember, LAMP and mean stacks, really, and the stack refers to the different tiers of architecture: the front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript tier. There's a bit of JavaScript that sits in there that talks in some respects to a server. That's usually done via Ajax as well. And then that talks to a server side, and the server side will be some back-end technology. It could be PHP, it could be Node.js. And some of those PHP, for example, will use a framework, can use frameworks. So I don't cover this in this lecture. Laravel, for example, is a framework for PHP that allows you to implement a lot of that REST APIs. I prefer to work with Express.js for my examples here as a backend. PHP is perfectly fine. There are lots of ways of doing it there. There is no web server per se in a mean stack. We tend to use the web services provided by Node.js running Express. We do have a server running Apache with the LAMP stack, and then we have a database which is MySQL. That could very easily be MongoDB if we wished as well. You don't have to use MySQL in the back end, but traditionally it was MySQL, some relational, or MariaDB, some relational database. And of course, we typically do use MongoDB in the mean stack, you know, and sometimes instead of using AngularJS, you see people using React.js. And so we can, or there's Vue.js as well. You know, so we sometimes see in place of the mean stack, we see something called the MERN stack, which is where we have React instead of AngularJS. So it's quite useful, quite powerful. So, but with LAMP anyway, it's the original development stack, and it represents the foundation of the modern web development. Okay, it's a relatively old technology at this stage. It's very mature, very reliable, very well understood, and a strong technology, as I'll show you a little bit later in this lecture. The current LAMP stack could be altered to replace, as I said already, MySQL with MongoDB. We could have PHP with Python. We won't go back to using Perl like we did in the good old days, but the acronym defines a low-level configuration for web applications. It's something to bear in mind. So then if we have the mean stack, and we're looking here at MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js, and it could be MERN if we wished, that builds the MERN stack. It's a powerful JavaScript-driven stack with diverse capabilities. It's a full stack JavaScript solution, really. And compared with LAMP, the database layer is replaced completely, if you like, with JSON or BSON storage using MongoDB. And we can do this with PHP and Python also. So, you know, that's not a problem. It also works really well with JSON across the whole tier, the whole 4 tiers. And JSON, of course, is the native data model language for use with JSON. It's relatively young. The framework is used extensively. It has many, many supporters. I'd like to see you developing with JavaScript, because I think it's going to be important for the future. We're not currently in a situation where we have lots of mature technologies using this full stack. We just don't have that yet. But, you know, it's a way to go, but it's certainly, JavaScript is really in demand in the jobs market. And we'll see a little bit about later in this lecture as well. Again, we just want to reflect on why we use these things and why I teach these things and why I want you to know them. And the reason I teach the two, as I said again, is so that you have 2 different models and approaches to how you might build solutions. And these architectures, then they give you a way to solve a problem using a web-based problem, right? And that's useful to have. Okay, remember then that MongoDB stores all the data in BSON format, okay? And both internally and over a network. But it doesn't mean you can't think of MongoDB as a JSON database. You could, you know, technically it's BSON, practically it's JSON. Anything that you can represent in JSON can be natively stored in MongoDB and retrieved just as easily as you can with JSON. So there's no explicit replacement for AngularJS in the LAMP stack. Mean removes the necessity for an explicit or general purpose HTTP server like the Apache in LAMP, as Node.js independently can run and build a HTTP server. And normally that's done using Express. Okay. AngularJS is also independent framework and it can be added to any LAMP stack. So I've seen AngularJS embedded in the front end of PHP solutions. You know, you can mix and match a lot of these. Okay. When we talk about mean and LAMP, we're almost like talking about 2 pure sets of technologies, but there's no reason that they can't be interspersed in some. So in this sense, comparing LAMP to mean is really unfair. Okay. Mean includes a front end component, whereas LAMP refers to just the back end, and LAMP refers to the low level, whereas mean is more high level. There's no operating system reference in mean, even though you'll probably borrow the Linux from LAMP, or you could be using Windows, or like me, I use Mac OS. So, you know, don't get caught up in the names and the terms, really. What's happening is that you have these choices of technologies, and the takeaway from this is that there are choices of technologies that you can use to build an architecture for your solution, and those architectures will have many different tiers, and you have choices of technologies for each tiers. So you can integrate, of course, these the LAMP and mean stacks. There's no reason for not adding a front-end component to LAMP. In fact, most implementations do. At the very least, jQuery will be used. And you'll see me, I've used jQuery for this as well. Sometimes people use Backbone.js. And nothing to prevent you, as I say, from using Angular stacked on top of LAMP or replacing Angular in the mean stack. You can use Ember.js, Vue.js, React.js, all sorts of technology. But you get a sense of like what the tiers are and what the tiers do and how you can then replace them. Your design doesn't have to be binary. Okay? It doesn't have to be a binary solution. Or choice, sorry. It's one or the other. You can develop a solution any way you like that uses both. You can have applications that can have many stacks or both stacks. You may have a LAMP for the API and a mean for the GUI. Okay, and then so it's definitely worth checking and understanding and maybe reviewing this kind of stuff. I would certainly recommend you read this article here on LinkedIn from Pulse, LAMP versus mean, deciding on the right stack for your startup, by Robert Roos. It's a wonderful article, really worth reading, and it gives you a sense of the choices that you have and the choices you can make and why you might make those choices. Okay, so it's probably it's a good idea to have a look at this one. It's really nice. Okay, I'd certainly recommend. Okay, so let's have a look at PHP and Node.js. Okay, so PHP is a hypertext processor, okay, and it's a general purpose scripting language that's been designed for web development purposes, almost specifically. You can see from me, when I use it, I sometimes use it on the command line for writing software as well. It was released in 1995. It's been used ever since as the first choice language for preference for content management systems like WordPress and Drupal. So if you use WordPress, backend is PHP. If you buy a web server and a web setup, for your own domain from Black Knight or any of the hosting companies, then you log in and you'll see that you can install the WordPress. And it's just a PHP setup for you. So, if you understand PHP, then you can manipulate your WordPress setup. It has a whole bunch of modern frameworks like Symfony and Laravel, which you can use for building REST APIs. Okay. Node.js, then, on the other hand, that's an open source JavaScript runtime environment that executes JavaScript on the server side. And Node.js development has changed the paradigm that JavaScript is used, primarily in the client side. That's why Node.js has become one of the foundational elements of the JavaScript everywhere paradigm. And Node.js was created by Brian Dahl in 2009. So it's not as mature in many respects as PHP, but it can do so much more with it. And it's constantly evolving. And we have the client side and the server side. So both Node.js and PHP are server-side scripting languages. They are bound to have similarities, but there are just various dissimilarities between the two scripting languages. Okay. And we just think in terms of the JavaScript on the server side. That's why I'm referring to it as Node.js. Okay, so these differences, don't apply to front end, because the front end, if you like, the front end of PHP, you can have PHP that has JavaScript embedded in the front end as well. Then, of course, you know this already, but I'm just referring to the back end. So, what are the similarities then? So, PHP and Node.js, they're both actually interpreted languages, and you should know this from your computer science stuff already, your compiler's course or whatever. They're not compiled languages. They are run in a runtime environment, and both PHP and Node.js are interpreted languages. Important to know that. They're both viable choices for building web stuff, and you'll see a little bit more hopefully. They can be used to build websites. Both run on the server side, and different reasons make one more preferable to the other, really. So Node.js is more extensive and faster compared to PHP. That may make it a bit more of a viable choice for certain examples. Some programmers prefer PHP because it's easier to pick up than Node.js. Features integrated database management. Sometimes it's a bit easier with PHP. You may find it's not. I mean, it depends on the developer, really. But the point I guess we need to know is the one is not simply better than the other. It's different to you. It's all about the context. It's all about the use cases that determine which one is more preferable to us for a specific project. So, some places still use PHP. Lots of places use PHP, and it works very well for them. And it's fine, and they ever need to work with it. Some use JavaScript and prefer to have JavaScript. on the back end with Node.js. Some just use Python, you know. So we start talking about the choices. You know, we have more than just these two, and it's important that you realize this. Okay, so when do you use PHP? So when you have a centralized service. So in the case we don't plan on scaling up our application in any way across multiple servers, we can always use LAMP. Okay, and it might change depending on the project requirements of the group. When you require portability, PHP is highly portable language. You know, the cheap costs of web hosting, the availability of servers for PHP is a huge factor of the popularity of PHP. It can run on almost any platform that has Apache. So if you can have Apache, you have PHP pretty much. If you have IIS, which is the Microsoft servers, and a supported database, then you know it makes PHP applications portable and can be deployed pretty much anywhere. You know, I've done it on loads of things. So, I mean, I have Raspberry Pis running all these things. You know, had those placed around the house. I have, you know, all that kind of stuff at one point. You know, you can get wearables, you know, that run Linux as an operating system. You can install a web server on that with PHP. You know, you can do all sorts of fun things with these LAMP stuff. If you want to use some kind of content management system like WordPress, Drupal, or Joomla, then they all use PHP as well. So content management system, great, you know, so blogs, all that kind of stuff at the back end, really you're looking at. Makes it easier to create some kind of website, works on almost every web host possible. And remember that WordPress alone powers about 30% of the web. 30%. That's a huge amount. And that's PHP at the back of this, doing all that work. Okay? And that's just one app. So if you want to use a relational database, people typically say use PHP. It depends on the data model, you know, that you're using. I don't necessarily agree with this, but that's the general advice. I think you can use PHP with MongoDB as well, or some other kind of database. But yeah, it's, you know, from looking at the various examples that we've done over the last while, that, you know, PHP works well with relational. It's nice. So when do you use Node.js? When you want to use the same language across the stack, this is the whole full stack development we were talking about previously. Node.js will be the correct choice here because it's really the only one that involves the full stack where you can use the same language right across the stack. Okay, if you want to have dynamic single page applications, or SPAs, you want server-side technologies, front-end technologies like Angular, JS, and Backbone, Vue, React, you know, you got to use Node.js. Okay, it makes it easier to have the same language across the whole stack, and it's also easier to scale up than LAMP across multiple servers. So when you want to require real-time data, Node.js is great for applications that have real-time accurate data, except for financial applications. You tend not to use it out of the box for financial applications. That's because JavaScript itself isn't particularly reliable when it comes to numbers, as everything's an integer or float, and there isn't much separation though between the types. A much more safe language, or type-safe language, is recommended when working on financial applications that require a lot of computing, or use some library that's really reliable, but then that might slow things down for you. Okay, remember, you know, financial computations rely on, you know, many digits, sometimes to make profits and losses and so forth, and you know, you're not just rounding here. You know, you need very accurate cases. That's why, for example, an awful lot of commercial applications still use COBOL, because COBOL is brilliant for financial processing. We don't teach COBOL anymore, but you know, I used to teach it many years ago, but it's super stuff. So we tend to use Node.js as well when we have a need for speed. It's certainly faster than PHP when it comes to execution speed. So for so it would be used if you want to, say, have a browser-based multiplayer game, or you want to have some real-time chat application. Then you start thinking about using Node.js in preference to using PHP. So I have a nice slide here which tells you a little bit about the various features, and you know, I ask an exam question about. I ask for, so this is always a good slide to refer to when you're asked questions about this kind of stuff. So we need to think about the runtime environment, the engines that you have, remember the complexity of the use, whether it supports JSON, concurrency, you know, where you use whether you have multi-threaded applications, the execution, how the execution happens, speed of the execution, the kind of web server, and the package manager. Right? So, Composer is used with PHP, for example, where we use npm for Node. Web doesn't need, and Node doesn't need a web server. Runs in PHP needs Apache. PHP is typically slower than Node.js. PHP is synchronous, but Node.js is asynchronous. PHP uses a multi-threaded blocking I/O for carrying out multiple tasks that run parallel alongside each other, and Node.js uses an event-driven model. So we've seen examples of these. They both work well with JSON. PHP tends to be a bit simpler to use. PHP is powered by Zend engines, and we know Node.js is powered by Google's V8 JavaScript engine. It's not bad having looking at this. So whenever you want to choose some of the other languages, you might want to look at Python. Or start looking at Java as your backend, and you'll find you want to do this kind of comparison test as well. And that'll help you decide which ones you use for your application. So some of the benefits of PHP, and I took some of these benefits here, just did a bit of a search really as to what the industry thinks, and I got this nice Think Mobiles article, and they say it's easier to configure the development for PHP. Some of you who've been working with this for your assignment might like to differ, okay? But generally it's okay. Node.js definitely requires more code to achieve something. In order to code on Node.js, you have to understand callback functions and blocking. So that's got to do with the event model, how it works, and it's asynchronous. All internet hosting services support PHP. It supports more frameworks and content management systems. There are official code organization recommendations, PSR. And PHP has a large library of instructions that frequently ask questions. There are plenty for 20 years worth of questions. So chances are, if something goes wrong, it will be better to use this. I'm looking at Jonathan McNamee's question there. Thank you, Jonathan, for asking in chat. Would TypeScript be safer in that sense or financial? TypeScript is probably safer anyway for most of your JavaScript, I would think. But yeah, and you may need to actually work with libraries that act as well. In addition, apart from the type sense, you need to have the actual the number of bits associated essentially with the model that's used to represent the floating point numbers will probably need to be larger, and you might have to have a library that allows you to do that in a computation as well. But yeah, but TypeScript is really important and interesting because a lot of people now code with TypeScript and then end up compiling to JavaScript, okay, in order to make it work. So it's super popular, and we don't cover it yet. I may cover it next year with you guys when you get to third year in my C# class, because I didn't do it last year with C#, even though TypeScript tends to be very much intimately tied up with using ASP.NET type applications and building C# backends, JavaScript stuff, and it's very, very powerful, very, very useful. And I wish we had more opportunity to teach it, but we don't. But yeah, I think in production, a lot of people would use TypeScript, and then JavaScript ends up, decompiled or recompiled from the TypeScript. In fact, in over the years of teaching this particular module, a number of students have always just used TypeScript and then generated the JavaScript from that TypeScript because they believe it to be a better model for programming, and I probably would agree with them. So I would certainly and so some of them made a mistake of just uploading the TypeScript, and then we couldn't test it in the normal way. So we always ask students that if they use TypeScript, send it JavaScript as well as the TypeScript. But we will accept them all the time. Ty get a question there as well. Node.js creator came out with a new one called Dino last year, and yeah, of course it does. Yeah, yes, and it uses TypeScript by default. I mean, I would much prefer to be able to do this and work this way, but for now, I don't rush to change things too much when I'm teaching the languages. I try to make one change every year or two changes to the courses, depending on the feedback from the students, from colleagues, from industry, and so that we're not constantly chasing the technologies and not chasing industry, and have something that students can refer to, and then we can reuse the videos and we can do that kind of stuff. But yeah, I suppose in a couple of years I'm going to have to revise this particular module as well and see, am I still going to continue with all of the technologies that I use, or will I do it in a slightly different way? Ideally, it would be best if we had a CS230 as well, where we had a second year of web dev, and then we could spend a little bit more time on the technologies that we have to rush through in some respects this year, and then, you know, spread it across 2 years, and then maybe do some more technology too. So yeah, but yeah, please, if you can, as Tig and Jonathan have said in the chat, and thank you for that, guys, do have a think about TypeScript and look at TypeScript if you have time at some point. It'll certainly help you when you're applying for jobs as well, and it'll help your understanding of the subject, which is paramount, of course. Thanks, guys, I appreciate that. So some benefits of Node.js then. So one of the main advantages is the support for multi-threading, okay, and that's really nice. So it is a necessity in browsers. It's not that much needed in the web development process, but a lot of developers choose Node.js over PHP because of this. It has built-in server support, and we've seen this with PHP, even though it's not a deployment standard. A single syntax for the client and server side of the website. That's just brilliant, okay? And it improves the reusability of the code, makes the work of a full stack developer easy. Like, I often find the case that when I'm doing something I'm full stack and I want to have Node.js on the back end and I have some JavaScript going on, especially if I'm doing some kind of form processing, I might have some validation on the front end. And then, you know, I'm a boots and braces kind of guy, so I will also have some validation on the back end too. And then in case something sneaks through or slips through, and I tend to so I can just copy the code across and just use the same validation code mostly. So it's nice, and I don't, you know, do different kinds of validation, and it's useful then. Okay. Also, for module caching, Node is good at this kind of thing. The modules are downloaded, initialized when they're called for the first time, and then they're constantly available, and that's very, very useful. Node.js's stream module makes it really easy to work with large files, and that's, you know, that's super. It really is brilliant as well. And there's lots of other examples. So Node, as we said, is powered by the Chrome V8 engine. There's many benefits. You could look at considering these and considering using Node.js, like when your project includes streaming data transfer. So traditional web stacks usually convert queries and corresponding HTTP to element events. There are data streams, and Node.js apps can take advantage of that. So a great example of this kind of data stream is file processing during the download or data transfer between the different layers. So it can happen like as is with the stream. It's good for real-time web development, so it allows you to develop chats, betting apps, Twitter, interfaces for instant messaging, all that kind of stuff. But you have to be careful. The response time can vary, and that has to do with garbage collection there, and it's not recommended that you develop an app or a system that's guaranteed response using Node.js. You should use something like Erlang for this, for example. Okay. It has expansion capabilities. It's great. Cluster packages, software packages, all sorts of stuff like that. So you could always have a look. If you really are getting into your Node.js, do have a look at the Chrome engine. Really useful. So now we talked a little bit about PHP and those. So I mean, I know sometimes when I give these lectures and I talk about this and we look at the kind of assignments that I have, it makes it look like, you know, we should all be using Node.js. Actually, you know, there's a lot of PHP stuff going on here. Okay. So I use this, I often and regularly use this website, w3text.com, to look at the technologies and get a sense of what's happening in the system. Okay, and I look at you know, what's used and where, you know, and I use this particular piece of software, this particular website here, in preference to some of the other sites. Now, earlier in the year, I showed you the Stack Overflow survey, and you know, and everybody wants Rust. You know, everybody goes on, and you think that everything was developed with Rust. But actually, that isn't the case, okay? What happens is that PHP, when I downloaded this particular one, PHP was used by 78.3% of all websites whose server-side programming language is known. Okay? So how do they know that? Well, they know that they could do a trail the web, this particular group, trail the web, and they're able to figure out from the technologies what technologies are being used. 78% of the web. That's pretty good, right? That's pretty impressive. You know, so if you know PHP, you're not doing too bad. And you can see that Java's popular. You know, some of the other ones are down here popular too. ASP is here, PHP. So it's used by many sites, okay? And it's used by midway. So the high traffic sites tend to use a lot of Java. The low traffic sites tend to use Ruby or something like this. And then the mid sites tend to use PHP, used by many sites. So it's a nice graph and chart and how. So we can switch, of course, to have a look and see about this. Find that server. I knew it wasn't going to find that server, but let's have a look at historical trends. So I decided to have a look at what's happening more recently with this, and this shows the historical trends for usage statistics of the various server-side programming languages. And this is impressive. And again, this is, you can read this, how they figure out and find out this information by just looking at the software, the pages, looking at understanding the pages. PHP 78.3 in April 2021, 79% in April 2021. Sorry, I beg your pardon. ASP.NET, then Ruby, then Java, then Scala, static files, they're interesting. Python, JavaScript, way down here. Look at 1.3%. And that's for the server side. Now this is for servers where it is known, okay, not for all servers. Perl and Erlang, you can see the Erlang stuff there. That's really good for the financial stuff and dependencies and stuff. We have Scala, Java, Cold Fusion, Perl, my favorite language. Perl is in there. But PHP, look at that for statistics. So if you're thinking, I'm not going to use PHP, you should know a bit about PHP. You know, if you're looking for jobs, mightn't be a bad idea to know some PHP. And if you are interested, you know, you could have a look at how exactly does the web analyzer work, you know, how we get those information. But if you then go to the Stack Overflow developer survey and you look at the languages that are most wanted, and these are about the developers, what they want to learn, you'll see Python and JavaScript are here. And PHP is way down the list, way down the list. So we kind of have mixed messages happening here. We're getting this message that tells us that a lot of websites that we know about use PHP, a lot of jobs, a lot of people looking for jobs, a lot of the developers, they want to use Python and JavaScript. They need people JavaScript. The most loved languages, of course, will be Rust and TypeScript, as the guys just said earlier. You know, all the coders, you know, the top-end coders, you know, they all want to do and use TypeScript and Python, Rust, Kotlin, Go, Julia, Dart, C#. I teach C# as well. Swift, of course, is good because the reason Swift is up there is because Apple development. And where's good old much-loved PHP is down here, okay? No one wants to know about PHP. Okay? There are lots of jobs in PHP, okay? But it's worthwhile happening. So if you go down to, say, for example, the Medium article, so this is a 2021 article, what are the top 5 languages for web dev in 2021? You know, and you'll see JavaScript, okay? No doubt JavaScript is the king of languages, it says. Python. TypeScript, of course. There. And PHP is up here. So, and it, you know, even this person who wrote this article is apologetic for including PHP, saying they get a lot of flack for including PHP because for web development, but PHP is one of the best programming languages when it comes to creating web applications because it's dynamic server-side language that makes it really, really easy to create fully functional web apps. Okay, and again, it has frameworks like Laravel, as we said already. Don't listen to people who say PHP is not useful. If you find it easy, go for it. If you want to learn PHP, go for it as well. So yeah, it's interesting. So I had a look at that, and then I said, well, let's have a look at the top server-side things from people like EBS. Again, you know, Swift, of course, Julia, all these things for numerical type work. Node.js is really, really good. It's not there. Python, Node. These are the languages that you need to use. PHP's up there as well, so it's good. I then decided I must have a look at the languages that will be in demand from the Analytics Insight. Again, we had Python, JavaScript, C#, and so that took me to Indeed, who are the jobs people, who what coding languages are in demand? Python, JavaScript, Java, C, all the C's, C++, all the C's, and PHP still. So, you know, I think it's what's really the takeaway here is that, you know, you can learn a lot. You know, once you have a language and you understand how that language and you can solve problems with that language, you'll do fine and you'll go far. Okay, so so it's worthwhile understanding and knowing these technologies. So let's think about something new then, okay? So something that really impressed me was the JAMstack, okay? And it was coined by the CEO of Netlify, Matthias Billmann, in a 2017 speech called The Rise of the JAMstack. And it refers to a modern development architecture based on client-side JavaScript, reusable APIs, and pre-built markup. Okay, and again, you can have a look at a really good article on this from Medium, from Alex Sanchez Designs, and it's really nice. So you basically way of putting together a lot of stuff that we know about already. So it serves as an alternative to the dominant LAMP architecture and mean stacks. So one that includes a number of additional advantages like security, speed, and SEO. And SEO, of course, stands for search engine optimization. You know, sorry, Tig, I see a question popping up there and I just missed it. I was looking at the wrong screen there. Okay, but I'll come back to it in one sec, please. So it also represents a development framework that eschews the use of traditional CMS, like, so you don't have WordPress, Joomla, or Drupal because of the difficulties associated with these. You know, and you know, why are there difficulties, you might ask? You know, let me just look at the question. Would it be fair to say that you're better off knowing how to use at least one language or framework well, and then look for jobs that use it to focus on languages that are currently in demand? Yes. I always think that it's good to know a language and know how to do things with that language. So a lot of students say they know Java, for example, because you learn it as your first language here. And I ask, well, it depends how good your language, what can you actually do with Java? And a lot of the time the students just learn Java to understand the basics of programming or understand some algorithms, but they don't go to the next step, which is maybe try to do network programming with Java, try to build a REST API with Java, you know, how to build database manipulation or write some games or backends or do something, services. So, you know, always learn. I would say focus on the thing you want to do. You know, I want to build APIs. I want to build, you know, I want to build games. I want to build chat services. I want to do specific kinds of APIs. I want to do financial type programming with that particular language on the back end. That way your knowledge of the language will increase incredibly because you know how to do something with that. A lot of the time you're not employed to just do a job or know a language. You're employed to do a job with a particular language. And so it's a mix. You know, I was talking to somebody from Oracle earlier today, you know, and there was, you know, okay, they want people who are good, but to know how to do something in depth. And as Jordan Murphy just said there, exactly, the more you know about, not just knowing about the language, but how to use that language in a context, then it will be better for you. So I think sometimes it's easier and better to do that using a single language, because the more familiar you are with that language, the more coding you can do with that language without making errors. Okay, and the killer for developers is to say only write 5 lines of code and then say I have to compile and check it. Another 5 lines, check it. You'll be writing hundreds of lines of codes without errors. And that only comes with practice and use of that language over time. On the other hand, sometimes languages change and sometimes people want to migrate from one platform to another platform. So knowing 2 languages, and this is why I teach 2 languages in this particular module here, is that the migration from one language to another language, in other words, knowing how to do the task in 2 different languages and knowing how to translate from code from one type of code to another type of code also gives you great opportunity for work. Okay? It means that, you know, as we move from perhaps legacy systems in PHP to a more modern system like Node, like a MERN or mean, and maybe even more modern again, like which is the JAMstack. So I think there's lots of reasons as to why, you know, you could use 1 or 2, and it depends. And of course, the really important thing to remember is that your dream job may come up using and require you to use a language that you aren't experienced. But you know, if you know how to do that particular job with an existing language, you still have a good chance of getting that other job because you're able to translate and you know how to code and how to develop. So it's a complex. Sorry, Tig, it's probably overly complex answer, but you know, it is complicated, and it isn't just as simple as the more you know. But although that is important, the more you know is always better. Is always better. I hope that helps. Okay. But anyway, let's get back to JAMstack. So the key characteristics of JAMstack then are JavaScript. Any dynamic programming during the request or response cycle is handled by JavaScript, and it runs entirely on the client. And it could be any front-end framework like React, Angular, Vue, all that stuff. Even vanilla JavaScript. I always get you guys to write a lot of vanilla JavaScript. I think it's good for you to know that. There's APIs. All the server-side processes or the database actions are extracted into reusable APIs, accessed over HTTP with JavaScript. There can be custom-built or leveraged third-party services, and then markup. The templated markup should be pre-built at deploy time and uses a site generator for content like Jekyll, Hugo, or Gulp or Grunt for web apps. And that's where the Jam comes from: JavaScript, APIs, and markup. Okay, and so it provides an alternative to this traditional, traditional like 2009 since we had Node.js really. So there's a direct reliance on a server-side runtime, okay, or a server-side CMS like WordPress, PHP, and CMS, of course, refers to this content management system. So really, what we need to have are these static site generators. So Hugo is one of those. It's very popular, and it's written in Go, and that's why in those earlier examples I showed you when people were looking for jobs, you'll see that Go was available as a programming language. Okay, it's fast and flexible, and you can have a look at this open source articles that I've recommended here, and you can have a look at Hugo, you can have a look at Go, and it'll tell you a little bit. You can also see Jekyll, and that's a static site generator as well, and it'll give you a text written in your favorite markup language. And my favorite markup language, okay, is Markdown, and it uses layouts to create this static website, and you can tweak how you want the site URLs to look. Okay? And again, Jekyll is written in Ruby, okay, and then so now you'll see as people move to JAMstack type structures, they'll require Ruby programmers, and that's why we're looking for Ruby, because a lot of the time the JAMstack utilizes Jekyll, so they need to use Ruby. Also, modern web development has lots of repetitive tasks running on a local server, minifying code, optimizing images, pre-processing CSS, all that stuff. So you can use Gulp for this. And Gulp is a build tool. It automates all these tasks. So you don't have to keep doing all this stuff automatically. So when you write your CSS, you don't deploy the CSS that you write. You often minify it in some way so that it's lower, really. Sorry, I see something there from Tag. Wasn't Ruby already popular? Yeah, Ruby was already popular because Ruby, as you say, Ruby on Rails. Yeah, that was always popular. But like, I liked it. A lot of the Perl people moved to Ruby instead. But yeah, it's a shame it didn't. But still, it's there. I mean, and it's becoming popular, of course. Again, I mean, I super language. Again. But use Gulp, you can see about that. But as I was saying, you have your CSS. You'll minify the CSS because then, so browsers don't care. Browsers don't like white space or care about that stuff or any of that stuff. So, you minify a lot of the code. And maybe I'll show you a little bit how to do this at some point as well. And then, of course, you need task runners. And they sit behind most web services. And they provide value to automation of numerous development tasks. Concatenating files, spinning up development servers, minification, compiling. Grunt is the tool that we would use to do that. So you could look up gruntjs.com and see those as well. So there's lots of tools and lots of ways of actually deploying services and solutions that are different from MERN and different from MEAN. So the key difference between JAMstack then really and the earlier one is the reduction in the server-side complexity, removing the need for a tightly coupled web server and app server, as well as the database or some content management system. It tries to remove a lot of that stuff. So JAMstack focuses on the client and services. The main web application can be distributed globally via a content delivery network, and where required, interacts with discrete services. So we would have this structure on the right rather than this traditional type 1, which would still be web, LAMP, or MEAN kind of structure. The JAMstack architecture is made possible because of the advancements in the web browser's capability of interacting with countless APIs, running complex applications on the client side, and the rapid growth of JavaScript front-end development, like React, for example. Build tools like Gulp, they make traditional web architectures obsolete for certain scenarios. So, I mean, if I was doing third year, if I was running my third year module in web dev, in addition to the second year, I would probably be focusing entirely on like some JAMstack type structures. You also need static site generators, okay, Jekyll, as I said already, and build tools like Gulp to provide a mechanism to automatically build web applications locally, producing a set of easy to cache static assets. And these assets then can be deployed with a simple git push, and it's a traditional continuous integration or continuous deployment methodology. We don't have time to talk about methodologies in this either. So that's why I wanted to do this lecture, to give you a sense of like, you're learning a lot about the technologies, but you're not learning about the deployment and running and management of all this stuff at large, unfortunately. So the advantages of JAMstack, obviously, there are performance advantages here. The web apps are pre-built. They're delivered as static assets, served over a content distributable network. It promotes caching and efficient SEO. Traditional web services are server-side, on-the-fly delivery, heavily reliant on database queries, and they all impact on performance. For security as well, static assets are the highest level of security in web. We don't touch with security either in this particular module. We don't have time to do this. But the static assets don't require databases, plugins, or execute any dynamic code server-side. Any required server-side processes are abstracted into APIs, and then they're called by the client, and that reduces the attack surface you can have in terms of for security purposes. So traditional web applications require server-side plugins to operate, which they're really vulnerable and require continuous maintenance. Also, for advantages of JAMstack in terms of automation, the workflow is automated. Modern static site generators, you use Git to push and it's done. The cost as well. Static assets are very simple to host. Don't want complex web services, web server configurations, highly simplistic, highly competitive market, very aggressive pricing, sometimes even free. The disadvantages, they're not great with heavy dynamic features. They're good for static type stuff. And so one of the significant limitations is that it doesn't do well with dynamic features like e-commerce, purchasing, logging in, all that kind of stuff. The features require a database. And then if you have a database like this, you don't really have the JAMstack. And they're highly dependent on third-party systems. So being dependent on third-party systems means that if they shut down, so does JAMstack. Okay, it's a real problem. So, but some examples. Smashing Magazine, they use Gulp, Hugo SAS. Sphero, Marvel Search, serverless framework. Netlify, of course, is the platform where it all started. And you can check it out here by going and you can check out Gatsby, which is a React-based GraphQL-powered static site generator as well. So, look, there's loads of technologies out there, guys, you know, but you have the basic stuff now that will help you with learning about new things, you know. So, and the idea is that, of course, if you come across a job you like the look of, you have your set of technologies that you know about already, try to compare them with the existing ones and do a match and see what can I use and how best can I promote what I have. We don't really talk about security, as I said. JAMstack has security things. These, I suppose, with the websites that run in the browser, essentially, they eliminate the need for a dedicated CMS server. So the browser becomes the platform with the CMS as a secure, reliable data source. So eliminating the CMS, the content management service, removes potentially almost all points of failure and attack. So all front end is executed in the browser, which is nice, you know, and it's almost impossible to break into the system. Always possible to break into things, I think, you know, some way or other. But anyway, but we don't have to focus as much on security, patching, maintenance, to do with some of the other solutions. Here's a traditional web. The browser, the internet, full page generator, the servers and CMS, all this kind of stuff here. And a JAMstack is a lot more simple. A lot more simple. You have a look at that in your we can look at jamstack.org if you'd like. Okay, so when we talk about stack, we don't talk about operating systems, web servers, backends, and so forth. It's not about technologies anymore. It's a way of building websites and apps that deliver better performance and a better experience as a developer. So when your deployment amounts to a stack of files that can be served anywhere, scaling is a matter of serving those files in places. CDNs are really good for this, okay, and often includes scaling and all. Loose coupling, separation of controls, also allow for targeted development, debugging, and the expansion. Selection of CMS options for site generators removes the need to maintain a separate stack for content and marketing. So it's worth visiting the resources in this link here on jamstack.org. Okay, it's definitely worth going there and checking. So which stack do you use? You can have a look at the rest of these slides as you like. We're nearly at the end. Okay, JAMstack versus Mean versus LAMP. You can choose which one you want. I've given a few notes here. I'd recommend reading this article here about, you know, which one do you choose. The author, in some really, the author recommends picking the perfect technical tools should really be given thought and planning. And the perfect stack needs to align with the usage of the site, the technical know-how of your team, the resources, and the overall budget. Okay, complex, you know, quite complex. You can consider the expected lifetime of the application, the type of application, the budget and maintenance, and the experience and knowledge you have with each tool. These all factor into which one you choose. Of course, APIs are really important. You know, JAMstack and Mean are API agnostic. It doesn't care where your package comes from. You can use any pre-packaged API if you like. So it's useful as well. A lot more. The LAMP stack is a little bit more different. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for watching. I just hope to give you a little bit of a perspective on the different ways and the way web stuff is going, and why we have all of these kinds of technologies. When you see ads for web developer, and why do they want Go? Why do they want Rust? Why do they want Ruby? This is why, okay? Because the platforms are changing. But that doesn't mean that the technologies that you're learning are not useful. They are learning. Okay, so I'd expect you to be very competent, and be confident about the fact that you can actually, you can go and apply for web jobs, okay, web dev jobs. There are lots of them out there, and you certainly have the skills, and you will have even more skills by the time we finish. So there's no set of lessons this week, as I said at the beginning of the lecture, so it gives you a little bit of a breather. You can focus on your assignments, and next week we'll move into the final section of the course, and we'll start off by looking about Express. I may put up some bonus lessons in the meantime, depending on how it goes. Okay. Thanks very much for coming along, and it's great to have you here. And I missed you last week, or the week before last there. I wasn't able to give the lecture live, and I do enjoy the participation, and a special thanks to all of you who asked questions or made comments or participated. It's great for me. It becomes a better experience for me, and I hope it's a better experience for everybody else as well. So okay, I'll see you all next week, and good luck with the current assignment. Have a good evening.